Joining me today is Jordan Ryan, Senior Director of Government Affairs at Illinois Policy. The General Assembly is set to return to Springfield on January 5th, and Jordan's going to break down for us what we can expect to see and what Illinois Policy is focused on this legislative session. Jordan, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me back. I've been waiting to come back and do the show again. I had a lot of fun last time. So
it's been too long.
It's been a long time.
Way too long.
Yeah, I know.
Weeks.
And it seems like you only want to talk to me when session's about to start, which is kind of hurtful. But I know some things about other stuff. I mean, not just limited to the session.
Like
so
baseball cards and stuff?
Baseball cards. You want to talk a little bit about art, the food scene here in Chicago. I mean, anything really, you know.
Right. Well,
big TV guy.
Now that I know you're a Renaissance man, I promise not to put you in
put me in a box
like
this.
Like that. Yeah.
I appreciate it.
All right. So let's talk about the General Assembly, because I see all of the news stories coming out about their return to Springfield and how there's going to be this really short session. Yeah. And the branding is it's going to be condensed, not
like
shortened.
milk, not shortened like bread. So last fall, President Harmon and Speaker Welch made the announcement that April 8th would be the adjournment date. The first time first time in my dealings down there that I've ever heard, not, the normal traditional May 31st at 11:59 p.m. Adjournment time. And then there was some sort of speculation over the following days after that announcement that, that's just kind of a soft date and, that's not, that's where they want to aim at. But then they were like, no, this is firmed up. And so when they printed the calendars, the calendar says on both the Senate and House calendar on the website, April 8th is adjournment day, which I think is still somewhat hard to believe, but maybe that's just based on our past work down there. So we'll see what happens.
Well, if listeners don't believe you, TK, maybe they'll believe the Chicago Tribune. I thought this was an interesting note in their story. Lawmakers finish by April 8th, like you're saying, be the earliest the General Assembly has adjourned since the 1970 Constitution took effect.
Wow.
The other times they adjourned, one on April 15th in 2000, then May 4th in 2006, and they're both election years.
Yeah.
Election years. So they just don't do anything during election years?
Well, typically an election year is lighter in general as far as substantive bills go, kind of focus more on things that need to happen for the state to operate. So, the budget, sunset extensions, on things that, might be expiring in the coming year. And then anything that's really just kind of pressing matter that needs to be addressed. So those are typically the kind of things. So it's not like this is, not doable. But I think it has a lot of people sort of kind of running around because, when you see 55, I think it's 55 days or 52 days in total. And it's, like you said, kind of condensed into this time. When you see it on the calendar, you go, there's just no way, right? There's just no way that we can do this. For whatever reason, that security blanket of having an extra, month and a half to do some work, I think gives people a lot of assurance, even though truly probably doable, in that same time frame. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. The weird thing is that the state of the state and the budget address are happening in their normal time frame, and so usually that happens in February, and so for you think about all of and we talked about this in the last show that I was on with the appropriations committees meeting over February, March, April, and then kind of the budget kind of really coming together at the end of May. You're now only saying a couple weeks in February, all of March, and then the first week of April to do that, right? And so even if it's the same amount of days, it just feels tighter window, more constricted. So I don't know if that's going to make things move more efficiently or if it's going to make people kind of spiral out and go, this is too much,
Oh boy. Well, the media's focused a lot on let's just get the budget done. That seems to be the big piece. You mentioned that. Obviously, there has to be a state budget.
Yeah.
So that's number one priority. Pritzker's always saying that's his number one priority. It's really funny to me to read how well people think that Illinois' finances are doing over the past several years. But we can talk about that more later. Really helps to have federal bailout. What else do you hear people talking about in terms of what might get done?
Well, I think in the immediate, session was supposed to start January 4th, and then I think we were scheduled to be in until that second week of February, and that's the only week break, and then back in through April 8th. They have canceled the 4th and the 6th now of January with sort of a warning or heads up that likely the next week will be canceled as well, and then potentially even the following week, all based around a spike in COVID cases and all that stuff that's happening. So I think on the 5th, what we're going to see first is an extension of the House rules to allow for remote hearings and votes and stuff like that. The Senate made it permanent for their rules, which means it's just limited to the 102nd GA, so the current General Assembly. But when they renew their rules, they'll have to take that up again. The House was wary to do that. A lot of members were, and I think rightfully so. I don't think that we should have just been making this a habit. So that's probably the first and foremost thing that you're going to see the House take up. There is an issue in the elections bill that was passed back in May that needs to be addressed in regards to, and I believe it's focused on how petition circulators are notarized, or how the petition form is notarized, and some of that stuff. So that's kind of holding some things up, which is, January 13th is the first day that petitions can start being circulated. And so that's a very small time frame to start going back in and opening that up. So I think they need to kind of take care of that immediately, and that's probably like the big focus for then. There's always, there's the talk of addressing what happened with the safety trailer that kind of failed to move during a veto session. So some fixes there, but I don't have a lot of details exactly on like what they want to do necessarily. I know there's some date issues that would make it easier for administrative stuff, but yeah, there's a lot of controversy around that bill, and obviously we've been seeing a lot more reports of carjackings and robberies and muggings and that sort of thing happening in the city. But it's not limited to just the city of Chicago. I mean, it's kind of sprawling out into the suburbs, near suburbs and stuff like that. I mean, we had the shooting in Oak Brook. So there's a lot of people kind of going, is this something that we really want to try to fine tune, or if we should maybe take another approach? And so I don't know if that bill is going to move, and it's not to say that there aren't good merits in it. I'm just saying in general, I think that's a hot button issue in an election year. And we were talking about how a lot of times things don't take place in an election year when someone can, doesn't have to go back far reach in their memory and pull out some kind of vote. They can go, this literally happened 2 months ago. You know what I mean? Like this, you literally just voted on this thing that we think is bad. So we'll see what happens there on that bill. Budget BEMP, obviously the biggest issues that need to be addressed. And then, one of our issues, but I think is something that is kind of gaining steam throughout the legislature and is something that will be sunsetting. The taxable year sunset is pushed back till 2024, but the effective date basically is kind of a 2023 stop. So we kind of need to address it in the next this upcoming year. Is the tax credit scholarship that's going on. So we want to make sure that that's something that we either push out the sunset, remove the sunset altogether, which would be ideal for us, and make the program permanent.
And for anyone not familiar with that program, it's a program basically where you can donate money to this Invest in Kids program, and it's tax deductible. And then low-income kids can apply for scholarship aid to go to a private school, right? Correct,
yeah. And, the program has seen a lot of success. It's very popular. But like most things that happen down in Springfield, there is an end date that's assigned when something's like new put in there called a sunset. And they do that for a couple of other for a number of reasons, but part of it is to kind of revisit after the program is coming towards the end of its life, or that set parameter of time, to see if it was actually a success or not. And I think by most people's judgment, this would be considered a success. In those instances, it's either appropriate to, push the sunset out further than what it had originally been set at, or to remove it if it's something that they think can be something that would continue to have that sort of success. So I think either thing would make us happy. Obviously, making it permanent would be the best option for us. But I do think that that's something that's going to be an issue outside of our doing as well. Like, I think people are going to take that up because there is sort of a clamoring for that amongst the varying caucuses out there.
Yeah, so. I hope that you're right. I think that you're right. It seems like it's got huge bipartisan support.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about metrics for success, I was just reading some of the numbers on the program, and I think the wait list is like 30,000 families who want to get access to this program. And so, it seems like there is need, and then there's political will. So I'm hoping that can move.
Those are usually the two most necessary things.
Right.
And it's making for strange bedfellows as well, because there's a lot of groups that would probably never ordinarily work on something kind of coming together and saying this actually benefits, a segment of the population that needs the most amount of help and stuff like that. But then it has broader ripple effects throughout society. I mean, if these kids are getting great education, if they're learning trades and getting diverted from maybe something where they wouldn't be successful if it's a 4-year program, or it's setting them up for the 4-year STEM or whatever it is, and getting them in being successful in their careers, like that means that Illinois, and hopefully they stay here in Illinois, the next generation is better off, and we're going to have, a great workforce, well-educated workforce, and skilled workforce. So benefits all of us.
Well, I'm glad you pivoted to talking about some of the things that we want to see happen, and starting with this Invest in Kids program, obviously, is one of our top priorities, and it seems like it could actually move in spite of the condensed session.
Yeah, condensed.
But let's talk about some of the other things that are in the hopper here, because I know you're on calls all the time with lawmakers and their staffs. You're heading down to Springfield really soon too. So what are some of the other priorities that are top of mind for you?
Well, we have our Tier 3 pension implementation. So back, I believe it was it 17? I think it was 2017. We implemented we established a Tier 3 pension system in the state, which allowed for state agencies to offer employees that are Tier 2 the ability to switch over to a Tier 3 system, which is sort of a hybrid between defined contribution and the traditional, state-backed pension system, and gave a little bit more flexibility. This was something that was, again, bipartisanly supported, and in a weird sort of, maybe intentional or not, loophole, let's say, I guess, there was no implementation date. And basically that means that this thing became law. It's out there. It exists. People can kind of ask for it if they want. And state agencies should offer it, but there's no direct date in which they have to do this particular thing. They have to offer it to their employees. And so our bill is very simple. Pick a date. Any date. Is it 2022? Is it this year? I'd be great. We should be able to. They've had 4 years to come up with a plan for it. Is it a year from now, to give them sort of time to catch up for something that they should have been doing? Like, whatever that date is, and we will land on a date. I think we're in negotiations right now. Is probably necessary, and it will help alleviate some of the pension debt that we have if people are choosing to kind of mix their money with what can happen in the marketplace versus what the pension system owes, and then also it I think gives people a better option for those that are not maybe the long-term employees that are sticking around for government or municipal service or whatever it might be.
And we talked about proving need and proving the appetite for something like this with the Invest in Kids legislation. What about Tier 3? Do you think that there's an appetite for a hybrid retirement system among government workers?
Well, I don't think the appetite has to be for that particular thing because it already exists, right? Like, so we're kind of beyond that, I think, point. I think there should be an appetite for people that that are wanting to address the pension system crisis, but are wary of something like a constitutional change or funding rates or whatever their solution is, like that is probably somewhat of a third rail. This is a good opportunity for them to kind of do a test balloon on like what the appetite is for larger pension reform, while still also making a difference in the current crisis, and saying, you and I were literally just talking about how sometimes we like to be proven wrong, and not sometimes we would love to be proven wrong on a lot of things. This is a good one that if like this works out and we see a mass exodus from tier 2 to this hybrid system, that like we could probably be proven wrong on a lot of our other solutions, or that there was a need for these other things. And so, that could be the appetite that we're looking for, not necessarily the creation of the system that already exists. Mm-hmm. So.
What about other bills? We've talked about things like adding a 3-day reading requirement so that big bills, like the budget, don't just get passed through at the 11th hour. What other items are on your legislative watch list?
Yeah, we have quite a few. That being one, and I think is something that we want to make sure that the taxpayers are aware of what's happening down in Springfield. And are given the opportunity to contact, their direct lawmaker or the committee, people that are taking up the issue in that particular time, whatever it might be, so they have an ability to address those things and concerns. But we also have a realistic approach to what it takes sometimes to move, expeditiously through the process and all these sort of things. So, again, like this is a 3-day reading requirement on a broad sense is what we want, but for any of those legislators out there listening, we're willing to negotiate on a lot of the finer points, and be reasonable about some of this stuff. Obviously, we have an unemployment insurance issue happening, and there seems to be a pile of money that is accessible to kind of address that right now. We've been talking about how great Fed money has been overall for the state finances, and UI is definitely one of those areas that we could, address that and is needed. And businesses have been putting up with quite a bit over the last 2 years now almost in regards to like what's happened as government shut down in regards to the pandemic. And so we held them hard. The government held them harmless when it came to unemployment occurrences during March of 2020 through September of 2020, and then they extended it out to December, and then it's been kind of pushed out there. So the whole harmless thing was necessary, but now there is a huge shortfall within the trust fund itself, and I think there is a simple solution: take the money that's already been approved from the feds and just pack her in there. So.
All right. Yeah, I see in our notes for that bill, which I hope moves, we appropriated $2.8 billion from the American Rescue Plan Act in 2021 for this year's budget. Mm-hmm. And now we've got $5.3 billion left to provide relief for Illinoisans. So I agree. I think that a lot of these small businesses need this lifeline.
Yeah. Well, because, while it was great that we held them harmless, and they should have been, by the way, that's not like that seems like a gift or something like that. Like that should have always been the case. It was to no fault of their own that this happened, right? But at some point, people have to pay the piper, right? And the fund has to continue existing beyond this. And so whether it's through a new formula for for fund building, or it's higher direct taxes on them through their liability, the fund has to grow and maintain. So, you can only hold them harmless for so long, essentially. And if the money exists, the money exists. Like, let's use it. Mm-hmm. So.
All right. So we're going to wrap here in a little bit, but how many days will lawmakers be in Springfield? What's your guess?
Well, I think they said, if I remember correctly, it was between 52 and 55. But I can't remember exactly the count, but obviously 2 have already been shaved off with the potential for 3 next week, and then maybe another 3 the following week. So, already sub 50 then, if that's the case.
Condensed, not shortened.
Condensed,
so
yeah.
why does this matter? If you're listening right now and you don't pay attention to this ever, the fact that lawmakers are only in the state house for a set amount of time, how would you explain to that listener why it matters that session is shaved by, month plus?
Well, if it's condensed and those are about the normal amount of days that, that we're in, I think it's twofold, right? Or it cuts both ways rather. So one, it can prove that the work can be done in a certain amount of time. So this idea that like long drawn out days and all these sort of like silly games that get played with like parliamentarian procedure are just totally unnecessary if we actually just sit down and do the work and we work cooperatively, and there's things that, that are being addressed as like top tier items, and we can actually do this in a way that would save them money and would save people all the time and the hassle and all that other stuff, and could be more transparent and open, because it would be that. The other side is that if it ends up not working and it's a complete disaster, well, then we put a lot of people at risk through like, not having the budget out in time and all these other things like that. So I think it's either it's an experiment. I think it can either be wildly successful and prove that like kind of the old way of doing business isn't necessary. It should be left that, it should be the old way. Or that maybe the old way was actually the only way we could actually get things done, and then in which case, experiment failed. So.
All right. Well, thank you for presenting both sides of the coin there. You always do a nice job of that. And good luck when you're down in Springfield this week.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Talk to you later.
See ya.